Oh, welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. Today we about to talk about books. We about to talk about the school to prison pipeline and anything else that's on our minds today. Thank you for joining, and we want you chiming in too. Come on back on the other side with us. Go. Welcome back to the South Star Classroom. That's Omar. That's David. I'm Charles, and we are back for another week of just discussing everything going on in the education world, but in a way that talks to our community. It's not for the ed wonks, but you are welcome as well. We want to have something that feels familiar, friendly, and fun. So, David and Omar, how y'all doing? David, let me start with you. How you feeling, brother?
I'm feeling good. Good to be here. We started the day off with Chris Stewart on his Freedom Friday show, Omar and I. So that was a good way to start the day. Definitely felt a little bit freer after having spent an hour with the two of you. Yeah, man, things are good. Looking forward to diving into our topics today. I know we had a big show last week talking about the Los Angeles City Council. I don't really. I mean, I think the only updates there on that situation in Los Angeles with the kind of self-destruction of their leadership is that not much has changed. So the two other council members have yet to resign, which is causing problems. And I didn't know this, but a city like Los Angeles, with the size of its Hispanic Latino population, only had 4 council members that were Latina. So one of them's resigned, and 2 of them basically are still there, but they're not really there. It's like Weekend at Bernie's. And so now you actually have one functioning Latina council rep on the LA City Council of the great large city of Los Angeles, which is kind of crazy. So that's just a follow-up and update there. But other than that, looking forward to jumping into today's topic.
That's what's up, man. How you doing? Oh, how you been?
I'm all right. So in part of the news, to all our wonderful listeners out there, do yourselves a favor. As we get into vaccination season, space out your vaccinations. Don't do what I did, where you got a pneumonia vaccination, a COVID vaccination, and a flu vaccination all at the same time, all on the same day. I've been a bit down and out for the last 3 weeks, but powering through it. I even went to the doctor today and I was like, listen, man, am I dying of pneumonia? What's going on here? Like, have I been shot and I just been rocking around zombie-like for, 3 weeks? He's like, actually, no, man, no pneumonia. Who told you to take those 3 vaccines in a day? And I was like, efficiency told me. So to our community, don't do that. But on the good end, if you all didn't get a chance, you got to pop on over to the 8 Black Hands podcast and the Freedom Friday podcast. David and I had the honor of being on the 8 Black Hands podcast with our fellow co-host, Dr. Cole. Fun time. And then we got to do Freedom Fridays with Citizen Chris this morning, way early in the morning.
Woo!
I mean, he was on that Eastern time, and David and I are on that Mountain, like Pacific time. I was still chugging coffee.
It's early in Central Time too. It's early.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Listen, it was so early here. It was still dark, obviously, and I got up about 15 minutes early. You know what I was doing about 20 minutes before the podcast started this morning? I was outside watching a meteor shower. We have a peak meteor shower here in Southern California, and so I was like, I got to be up for this podcast, so I might as well just get up early. And so I was like literally stargazing out there in the pitch black sky. I saw like 3 or 4 meteors come across the sky, and then I hopped on the show.
Man,
Well,
that's
that's beautiful.
Wow.
that's amazing.
And what did y'all? So Sunday there was fireworks. I was on that show, so it was most of the fireworks came from me. So got that. But Monday, this morning, what was the show? What was the topic of the show? How'd it go?
Omar, go ahead.
Oh man, okay, cool. I think it went exceptionally well. So David, Chris, and we kind of stretched off of the Los Angeles thing and started just talking about Black and brown relations, period. Hey, like, why are they constricted? Not just what can we do, but how do we tie this back to education? And I think David did a really good job of setting up house this morning, as he often does, of once again connecting what we're trying to do with the South Star Classroom, what we're trying to do with the Black and Brown Collective, and then tying it all into education. And I think very specific pedagogical approaches. Funny, I thought it was a really fun, great, erudite conversation, a ton of substance. Chris asks incredibly thoughtful questions and has really solid and great elaborative answers, which matched, David's eloquence. I was kind of the black sheep as usual. And then someone decided to poke the bear, man. Some dude decided to start some smack. I was like half awake. And I was talking about something historical, Shays Rebellion, and I am about history.
And you shut it down.
Like, yeah, man. And I'm like, yo, listen, dude, if you're gonna come at me with historical talk, you better be 20 times better. He shoots off a comment after I make I make this metaphor about Shays Rebellion, which I often do, about, hey, this is about a group of people uniting under the banner of economic equality, and how this is one of the first examples in the United States history where the white dominant cultures told the low-income white farmers, hey, like, you should not align yourself with these Black and brown people. You should come on over to our side, because if you mess with us, we're really gonna hurt you. And you don't want to be hurt as bad as these Black and brown people. So come on over to this sweet side. And this dude pipes off and says some comment like, what you've said is grossly inaccurate and doesn't portray what actually happened, and it fits the speaker's narrative. And I'm like, word? Because, let me just take a second to ask, like, where'd you get your references from? But like The Rock says, it doesn't matter where you got your references from. If you're going to come at me with historical or political or constitutional information, you got to come correct, man. I read every word of the Federalist Papers several times, the Anti-Federalist Papers, every word James Madison wrote about the Constitutional Convention. Hell, I studied under the Pulitzer Prize winning professor for constitutional and colonial America at Stanford. Like, you got to come correct if you're going to come with that shit. So David and I were like, The best part was
that's your jam, though. That's what you do.
Chris,
you know what I'm saying?
I was going to ignore the situation, and Chris like, oh, shoot. Oh, man, this guy came hot. Listen to this man talk that smack. And I'm like sipping my coffee being like, it's too early for this stuff right now.
Well, look, man, I'm glad. I got to go check that episode out.
It's funny.
Post a link for us when you get a chance, so people can get a chance to watch that. But and if you are watching, please share, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, so we can keep these conversations going. And I like seeing y'all with Chris and the boys, man. I actually think that it's good adding that dynamic there. For me, I was in SoCal for a few days. I had a conference to go to. Did some work, had some presentations to do both nationally and locally. But I've been slowing down, man. I have like 2 more trips this year. Then I think I've had my calendar has gotten cleared, man. I have been weaning off of social media. I've been working out more, trying to work out every day. I definitely had a relapse on diet soda. But other than that, I've been good. I'm getting that svelte look back. I trying to get back into basketball shape, man. But and I've been busy, and we've been writing a lot of reports. I did one with David and Omar, just translated, but also just putting out free books and free content, and I'll put it up. But you can go to charlescode3rd.com. I would suggest that you go there and sign up. The reason why I would suggest that is because at some point I will not be as active on social media per se, but I'll have everything at the website. And if you haven't subscribed to David and Omar's social media, please do that. But people keep asking me, like, why are you doing these free books? Why are you like working this hard and doing whatever? And let me just be very clear. First off, we're here. Let me add it to the stream real quick.
Yeah, man, check that out.
Backwards. Yeah, oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Stop Hustling Backwards is more about it's just what I needed when I went to college. When I went to college, I was in that thing alone. Like my parents, it's not that they didn't want to help me, right? But my parents didn't go to college. Like I had parents that had been to jail. I had uncles that knew people in jail and all that good stuff. So, you know, the irony is that when I almost quit school, right? Like my parents, let me give an example, right? As I scroll through this, and you can go to charlescode3rd.com and you can grab it for free. But I was like, my parents were always the type where I'm like, hey, mom and dad, I need your tax information for FAFSA. Like I need to I have to do this. And they was like, why do them white people need my information? And it's just like, no, I need to for this financial aid stuff. So I would always get that stuff late. My dad worked jobs. We had moved to Stockton my senior year and I came back to the Bay, but my dad worked these jobs in the Central Valley. And what his job is when trains derailed, they were the people that cleaned it up. Well, funny enough, trains derail a lot more than I thought that they did. So there was this big crash in the Central Valley, like on the way to Fresno, and he got a lot of overtime, and it changed his tax bracket. I lost all my financial aid for like that year. And so, I didn't have a book, or I didn't have like parents or uncle or friends that knew how to manage this stuff. So I had to take out a lot of loans that I'm still paying off. And it's funny because I was gonna leave school. I almost left, and my uncle sent me the thing that he knew how to send. He sent me a jail package that you send to people in jail. So for people that don't know this, you can ship things to prison. You can ship things to jail. You can ship like snacks or little things that you can get in commissary. They're gonna go through it or whatever. So he sent me all these little snacks and stuff, man. And it was these Welch gummy, like little gummy joints, and they became my favorite candy. That is what kept me in school. So when I write books like Stop Hustling Backwards, for Black boys who are gonna be the first in their family, or this free workbook that's coming out in a few weeks, month, depending on how fast I get stuff done. That's an interactive workbook. It's the workbook that my parents needed when I was in school. It's the workbook that here's a template in how you email that teacher. Here's a template in how you introduce yourself to the principal. Here's some questions for you about your kid that we want to make sure you know and you lock in with before you even go up to the school. And it was just so when I start those things, or we do South Star Classroom, or even my involvement with 8 Black Hands, even though that's more of a, the four of us started that at a different time. I'm only trying to just create things that I could have used and that I needed. So I'll do one book. Like this book is the one book that I charge for, and I use the profits from this or the exposure from talking on, Beyond Grit and Resilience to put that stuff back in, and I write and publish and produce these other books, out of my own pocket, and I give it away because I don't want to be nobody's role model. I don't want you looking up to me. I don't want you having your kids look up to me. I don't want you looking up to me. I am good at this one thing. This is what I'm good at. This is what I want to do. All I want to do is give you some tools. I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be the woke warrior, the anti-woke warrior. I'm not trying to be Twitter famous and nothing like that. But what are the things that would have made my life a little bit easier? That's what I want to build out. And so please go to charlescode3rd.com. Please leave your email address. That way you can make sure that you get whatever newsletter we have out. And that newsletter will include writings from me and the fellas. It will include updates on these podcasts and the work that we're doing, and then projects that the South Star Classroom will be engaging in as a team. So that's my piece about it. Hopefully, I don't know if you all got a chance to read it. I'll say this last thing and then I'll take a breath because I have a tendency to do that. What I will say is this, man. If we don't build stuff like for our people like that, it's not going to be there. It's just not going to be a thing. If we keep telling people to wait on systems, we always just going to be waiting. And so I'm just grateful, and I appreciate you brothers for being able to, to rock with me and being in support of that. And William Conrad, I want to be very fair to one of our number one fans. William Conrad also has a book called The Fog of Education. William, I have not read your book cover to cover yet. But if you send us a copy, I definitely, we'll definitely take a look, or if you tell us where to go, put it in the comments and we'll put it up. But yeah, and I wrote this thing, man. I'm also past the point in my life where I'm trying to write stuff that includes everybody. I'm done with that. That's not my ministry. That's not my calling. I wrote this book specifically for Black boys that grew up like I did. That will be the first in their family to go to college. And what I have found is me being true to myself and me being true to my own voice and my own experiences. It actually has helped out a lot of other people. I've had Asian women that read it, that's the first in their family, be like, yo, this is actually really, really helpful. I wish I would have had something like this, or I'm sharing this with my kids or whatnot. So, instead of trying to cater to everybody, instead of trying to virtue signal to people, I just do my thing and I'm gonna keep it pushing. But that's it for me on that part, man. And so I don't know if anybody got thoughts, if anybody got a chance to look in it, but I would love for y'all's thoughts whenever you do get a chance to.
Cool. Yeah, I've checked out some of them. I like the fact that especially the kind of guidebooks are very practical for young people or for parents. I feel like sometimes literature that we put out, trying to help and inform people is too wordy, and people essentially don't read it. So I feel like you hit a good spot with the length and kind of how these resources are organized. So I've dug in a little bit, but I'll do my work and I'll do a deeper dive as well.
That's what's up, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man, I'm excited because I think that I want to jump in. I finished reading the whole report that y'all did for Charter School Growth Fund that we translated.
Oh yeah, we need.
I wanted to take my time and digest it and talk about it because it's excellent, right? And it's nothing that we don't know. And it was really cool because my mom, who, by the way, audience, I have a wonderful mom. She's amazing. Teacher herself, civil rights activist, led the game. I'm really just kind of trying to pick up the mantle where she left off and continue the work. But she also is just kind of like bloody brilliant and has a degree in Spanish. So my mom and I tackled the translation, and I took the stab, and then she came in and cleaned it up and accents and everything else. She has a really interesting comment, and she's like, Boogie, which is my nickname, by the way, Boogie, like, who's the audience for this? Like, who are we sending this out in Spanish to? And it's a good question, because I think my immediate response was like, if you look at the charter landscape, the overwhelming majority of leaders, founders, and teachers are all white. And if you look at the majority of the students they're educating, they are Black and brown. And I think that my hope is that the Spanish translation of this publication, which, by the way, we'd love to share out with people when we're allowed to share out, is an opportunity for our families, our Spanish-speaking families, to see that we are responding to their needs, see that I believe their inner impulse, not impulses, but their inner monologue of what they believe would be best for their kids is actually validated by data. So I'd love to talk about that. And then I got to tell you, listen, one, I want to read Cole's book. Let's chop it up on one of these shows. We can make it a topic. And then, Will, send us the
I wrote
book,
it in
man.
a very easy to read way.
Well, listen, bro, you mentioned the Fog Education all the time, man. Listen, send us the book. I will read this thing. We'll chop it up. You're on the show all the time. Like, we'll have a great day talking about the Fog of Education, because I feel like we're talking about a ton of stuff that you talk about in the book already.
Yep.
There you go, man. There you go. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you all indulging me.
I would love you, man.
I appreciate it, man. I need to talk about it Sunday too, because I have to do a better job of pushing it. I'm at the point where I just want to produce stuff, and I need to like find a machine that's gonna like do the marketing. Like I'm like, yo, I wrote it, I helped design it, I made sure we had this and that, and worked really close with our designers to get it done. And
so
stuff.
you're trying to do the reverse P. Diddy. You
Man,
just want to produce the videos. You don't want to sing in the videos. You don't want to dance in the videos.
I've been out front enough. Man. You know what I want to do? I want to go to a remote location in the world, probably Paris, and just write and work, and then close a laptop, and then drink the best wine I've ever had, and smoke the sweetest cigar I've ever tasted, while eating.
I want you to invite us.
Fine French cuisine. I would love that, man. We just got to start booking these international dates, man. But speaking of that, though, right, as we talk about, you know, where education can take us and where things can take us, well, there's a lot of things that's happening. There's a lot of rights being taken away, and there's this thing that we always tend to talk about called the school to prison pipeline. And I know David, there were some things that he had wanted to kind of lead into and talk about. So, you know, I want to make sure I shoot that over to the beard of. Is it the beard of wisdom or the beard of knowledge? I always forget, Omar.
You know, I think it vacillates back and forth. I believe it's the beard of knowledge, but, you know, beard of wisdom kind of, it fits, man. This man's a multi-hat magician of the education community.
Beautiful gray. Like it's the beautiful like symmetric gray and black mix that makes me think of wisdom. So we will throw it to our brother who is lavishly living in the San Diego sun right now, who got to see a meteor shower this morning.
Exactly. Yeah. My wife might agree on with the phrase "the beard of knowledge," but she probably would not. She would highly disagree with the beard of wisdom. So I'll leave that there. We're over a year into this show, and I know the 8 Black Hands is you guys are way ahead of us. And there's a lot of talk as a result of, we've been talking about it for a long time, but as a result of the pandemic, this thing called literacy has come to the forefront, right? We're seeing a national movement, and people are paying attention, you know, to a lot of important things that we should have been paying attention to a long time ago. And the reason that I and Omar, I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Well, let me
Charles,
mute myself.
Okay.
I mute myself.
The reason that we talk about literacy is because if you've worked in and around schools, and if you live in particular communities, you know, you see the impact and the power that literacy holds to really engage young people in, you know, on their learning journey. And we've also seen the power that, you know, is harnessed when young people are not taught the basics of literacy and what happens, you know, what their life trajectories can look like. You know, if you live in particular communities with high poverty rates, you know, you see the conditions that people are living in, and it's, you know, too many times unacceptable and very unfortunate. So rewinding back to schools, I think, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, we're going to talk about prisons eventually, but I want to rewind because, and I want to get very clear, Charles, if you can pull up this, the PDF, I want to bring to the forefront. We talk about the school to prison pipeline a lot. And I found this very interesting infograph that we'll take a look at here, and just kind of like, you know, look at making sure that we have a shared understanding. We don't have to agree with 100% of what we're seeing here, but you know, and I don't agree with 100% of what's here. This is a couple of years old, but this particular one-page infograph does break down what the school to prison pipeline can look like in schools, right? Oftentimes, and there's been so much of a focus on getting the police out of schools. The policeman or woman or person sitting in their car in front of the school, I'm going to say this again and again, is not the problem. What we have here are everyday practices, interactions between adults and young people in schools. That is the real issue. So when we want to end the school to prison pipeline, we've got to look at these particular areas of school management, of school climate, of instruction, and how we move and how we act and how we engage young people in our schools. So I'll just take a few. We talk about the actual climate, the physical environment of a school, right? Things that, connect to the school to prison pipeline, surveillance cameras, right? Armed guards, metal detectors, physically, even something like a physically uninviting building that students have to walk in and around and out of every day, right? These are a couple of areas. We talk about discipline, right? And now we're talking about school policies around discipline, suspensions. Out of school suspension is a huge issue, right? This is where it starts. This is where young people begin to the process of disenfranchisement with school, right? Overrepresented Black boys and then brown boys, right? And we'll look at some of the statistics. Expulsions, zero tolerance policies, transferring to the alternative school, right? Over on the other side, we've got underinvestment. So some of this has probably changed as a result of COVID, but historical cutbacks on counselors, social workers, mental health. Some of that has changed as a result of COVID. Let's see, let's keep scrolling down. There's some statistics here I want to cover where it says out of school suspensions, and then we'll stop to reflect on this. This is from 2017. So this is out of school suspensions. Students receive an out of school suspension annually. About 3 million students are held out of school for a day, right? That's wild. When you look at what those students look like, we start with the bottom. Black students with a particular disability. So Black students with IEPs are the most likely to be suspended from school, right? And then Black, and then Native American, Latino, and then white. Now I want to point this out. This is really important. These statistics roughly mirror the representation of these particular groups in prison, right? So you can superimpose and look at the data around suspension in schools, disaggregated by particular groups, and you're going to more or less find a pretty good match with USA 2022 prison demographics and statistics, right? That's the connection that we're talking about. Keep scrolling down. I mean, here we just have, there's a couple of other pieces around harsh discipline policies. Sometimes students are suspended for really like basic things. Essentially in many states, they're still allowed to suspend based on defiance. In California, they're not. But you can see some of the things there. Hugging a friend, chewing a Pop-Tart, into the shape of a gun because it represents some kind of a threat, right? This starts very early, even as early as like the early elementary years. And so if you take many of these practices and then you look at what's happening nationally, historically with literacy, you have the two pieces that kind of go into this cauldron, which are called the school to prison pipeline, right? Young people being pushed out of school, dropping out of school, being forced out of school. And we know that the data tracks from that over to young people becoming engaged with the criminal justice system, ultimately ending up behind bars. So I want to stop there and just see if you all have any questions or thoughts or reflections on this, because again, I feel like sometimes we want to talk about the easy thing. We want to talk about getting rid of the cop in the cop car in the front of the school. We want to talk about, let's just hire more counselors. We want to talk about, kind of cherry picking these things, but really it's the entirety of this list and more, which we need to be looking at when we're rethinking about how we design our schools for young people, because we know even today in 2022, Black boys and brown boys are oversharing the burden compared to their peers, and that's 100% a fact. So just some quick reflections on this, and then I want to go into this other piece.
Yeah,
Go
man.
ahead, Omar.
Doc, you
Go
want
ahead,
to? All right. This sounds nuts. And look, I talk about our school a whole lot on this podcast, so I'm not always trying to make this about our school and the organization. But when I mention it, it's a bit of a microcosm for what I think is going on across the country. And the conversation we were just having is that like 64% of our kids at the El Paso Leadership Academy are emerging bilingual. Okay. And that means that they're struggling with language development. And as a result, they're struggling immensely with literacy. So it's not that I like went off, but I went a little Tony Stark on the team recently. And I was like, listen, guys, like your remediation work or your push in, accommodation is so old school. You're sitting here talking about tutoring. You're sitting here talking about like, pull out for linguistic support. I'm like, I've been yelling this for years, and finally, I'm just going to definitively ask for a plan. And if you don't produce one, I'm going to make it myself, and that's going to be embarrassing for everybody. Because once again, it's like I'm not Tony Stark, and Tony Stark devised this plan in a cave with scraps. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go back into the cave and make these scraps, because ultimately, how am I able to do this? Literacy in every single classroom and every single day for every single kid. And I'm not saying that it needs to be like a definitive literacy lesson. I'm like, how are you not incorporating 5 to 10 minutes of some just simple literacy support in every single class, and every teacher being trained on how to provide literacy support? Because these kids are smart. The problem is they don't know how to access this language, and then they don't know how to read in this language, and therefore they're lost. They're disenfranchised. And then they were like, oh, well, these are EB kids. And I was like, dude, wake up. If you look at the national statistics for literacy for across the board, even white students, even Anglo students, it is abysmal. The United States is functionally illiterate. And I know William Conrad's probably like popping off fireworks right now because he's been talking about this forever. But the humongous problem that this country is not facing is that you're not addressing one of the key issues, which is access to the content through literacy. And that's a huge vehicle. Look, there's 1,000 things going on here in this school to prison pipeline. And David's right. You can't just sit here and throw the usual suspects of they need more emotional support, they need more tutoring. I'm like, word, yes, they do. But what they really need is to be able to access this material so they can be successful, because oftentimes them students acting up, which I want to preface in a parentheses in a second, so wait on this one. Students acting up is oftentimes a situation in which a student is either bored or frustrated because they're not able to access the material. And when I talk about acting up, I'm talking about like simple stuff that sadly too many of our teachers blow out of proportion and target Black kids and target brown kids. And listen, I taught Black and brown kids, and I saw this thing going on, and I was just, this is funny. Like, this kid wilding out a little bit, but no problem. What's going on? And it wasn't even that wild. And then people coming to my classroom thinking I'm some miracle worker. And I was like, no, man, did you talk to this kid? You done a diagnostic? Here's what's going on. Here's how to reach this kid. Boom. So kids that were Black and brown in my classroom, who in other classes had like several detentions, several marks, several like recommendations for suspensions. I'm like, yo, how is it that I've got no problem with this kid? So my hot take quickly on this is the conversation I just had with my school being like, you're not devising a very holistic plan for reading and literacy across every single classroom and understanding how to, in Will Conrad's words, Bill, planned, implemented, and monitored well. And that's one of my big things that I'm just like, yo, like, how are people not seeing this? And this is what's going on. This is what's leading kids to be frustrated in school. It's one of the many reasons, let me say.
Now, I think I agree with you, man. I agree with you. I think that the way that you took it on schools, I'll go a different direction. I'll go to students, parents, and community, right? Like, I think that when we look at that PDF that David just brought up, you got to be asking some questions either before you put your kid into that school, or if you're seeing this, your kid is already in that school. Like, I think it's okay to ask these questions like, hey man, how many times, how often do we call the police on kids and for what reasons? What is the discipline policy here? Yo, I want to, do you all have my phone numbers? Can you ensure that if there is a situation that's kind of crazy, can you give me your word to call me first before that happens? Like, what are the restorative practices at this school?
Right.
Like, how are we thinking about those things? I actually am somebody who truly believes in restorative justice, and I don't know if that's because I went to school in Oakland and it's been a thing since conflict resolution and when I was in elementary school.
It works, man. It works.
I do. I think it works. I think it definitely cuts things down. You know what I mean? You might, out of 100, right? I think that 80% of those would be like, you know, not escalated to a certain level, and you restore people in the process. And just for those people that when they talk about restorative justice, let me be very clear with you. I remember when I was living in Oakland and somebody stole my car, and eventually they found the car. They recovered the car. And then the person who stole it had to pay restitution. But that restitution didn't come to me. I still had to like get a new car because I didn't want to have a car that somebody done been in, joyriding around. That went to the state. How's that? So this person going to jail, I gotta ding on my insurance and I gotta go through this. And the state gets like restitution. How does that work?
Crazy.
Okay. That's systems for you, baby. So what I'm saying is like, but that's the same thing I see when I look at that worksheet that you sent over, David. All I see is that there's an entity that's getting some restitution. There's an entity, our prison system that makes money off of our kids being there. But there is no restoration for that student, for that family, for the the person that was harmed or offended, the school or whatever the case is. And I think that, you know, everything that Omar said, and David for bringing it to our attention. And even though it's not your fault, even though you shouldn't have to be responsible for it, if your kid is there, if you are there, if somebody you love is there, if you're a community leader, these are questions that you should be asking, and a school should be able, or a school in that system should be able to give you answers. And if they not, then you got a whole different set of issues. So I'm glad you brought that up, David.
And one practical piece here is, you know, we're right now in this like short window of time where there's a national discussion around putting pressure on school systems to release the academic data from last spring's math and English language arts standardized assessments, right? They should. What we should also be pushing for is for districts to be transparent with bringing forward their school discipline and suspension data and make it public site by site, make it public for the district, and provide it in a way where we can see different groups broken out, because one number is going to hide a whole bunch of numbers underneath it, right? And so we have to be pushing for disaggregated school discipline and school climate data, as well as the academic data that the public deserves to see. I think looking at this infographic and this topic, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago when we were on the subject, but we were talking about the choices that young people make, and even in, you know, certain environments, urban environments, suburban environments, where there are, you know, there's a bad choice on every corner for young people to make, right? Sometimes they go looking for it, sometimes it finds them. We talked about the fact that when young people are engaged and connected with school and engaged in their learning, like, I'm going somewhere, right? I have teachers that have my back, that support me. I've got homework to do. I've got to turn this stuff in tomorrow. I'm thinking about a test in 2 weeks. I'm thinking about UC Davis or Cal State East Bay or Cal State Los Angeles or UTA, whatever it is, like a sense of purpose, right? And when young people don't have that sense of purpose, that's where we see them making really poor choices. And again, overrepresented Black and brown boys that are, you know, making these choices and ending up in the criminal justice system. So, so with that, I want to turn to this other piece, Charles, if you can get this piece up. So now we're fast forwarding to a conversation about something that, you know, we don't talk about the school to prison pipeline enough. And then we also essentially, once people end up in prison, like we just don't talk about them at all, right? Whether it's like rehab or reentry or whatever it is. And we need to start talking about this more, because these are human beings that at some point in time made a bad choice, a poor choice, a series of poor choices, and are now incarcerated. And incarceration in the U.S. looks very different across the 50 states. This is a piece that I found today. It's on a publication called Open Campus Media, where it's essentially an interview between two people that is linked to a larger podcast, which is called Death by Incarceration. It's a very interesting ecosystem, something that I'm learning more about, tied to the famous journalist Maria Hinojosa, who was on NPR. And so there's a lot of really important work. The Ear Hustle podcast that some people may have heard about, that comes out of San Quentin, which is a maximum penitentiary in California, in the Bay Area. And so essentially, to break it down, and then we'll have a discussion. This piece is a discussion, a conversation, an interview between two individuals, one who's recently freed from prison and one who is about to be freed from San Quentin, talking about their different experiences with having access to education while in what they believe to be a life sentence, right? And the access to different types of programs, the concept of I have two choices here. I either choose education and I'm going to do whatever it takes against all the odds. I think I'm facing life in prison. And again, their experiences, one of these individuals is like, I'm in 10th grade. That's when they got involved in the criminal justice system. 10th grade, couldn't read, right? Connections to literacy. And they both found a path towards educating themselves while incarcerated, right? And one of them is out doing work supporting individuals that are doing the reentry process, and the other one is doing this podcast out of San Quentin. It's a very popular podcast. It's called there's two, the Death by Incarceration, and then Ear Hustle is out of San Quentin. And I just felt like it was a really important piece, because they say the same thing. They're like, without education, I wouldn't have had a purpose in prison. I wouldn't have had a purpose. And so when you don't have a purpose, you are all of a sudden concerned about all the other things that people are concerned about in prison, which 99% of them are bad, right? Looking to get into more trouble while you're already incarcerated. And so I just felt like the connection between, we're talking about here are these words from these individuals that were or are in prison about the importance of education, engaging people, giving people a sense of hope, a sense of purpose, is the same conversation that we have when we talk about K-12 and young people needing to have high quality education that they can access to give them a sense of purpose and hope, right? These things are not separate. They're directly connected. And so I just think it's a fascinating story connected to what we talk about. Again, we don't talk enough about what happens after, when young people are locked up in the system. And so we'll start today, and we'll bring this theme back as we go forward. But wanted to get your takes. We're kind of we got 15 minutes, so I'll let the two of you kind of, have at it now and just share your reflections, what your thoughts are. There's an interesting patchwork of programs. Some states don't allow inmates to have any access to education, and some, it's one of the good things about progressive California, is that they do certain prisons do have access. They provide access to inmates with a variety of programs. So I'll stop there and then let the two of you provide your reflections or anything else you got to say.
Well, I'll let O bring up the rear on this one. You know what I mean?
Doc, again.
Let that eloquent guy, go after me on this one, so I don't have to follow him. I would just say, man, I think I love stuff like this. I love listen, man, my whole life has been about redemptive stories. I started this conversation talking about, you know, I mean, there's been far more men in my family that have gone to prison or jail than college. And that's my family. I'm not saying what the statistics say or whatever. I'm talking about my experience. And I think I like those redemptive measures. The places that I've been and the groups that I've been a part of that I trusted the most was when my mother was getting clean and I went to NA meetings with her at like 5th and 6th and 7th grade. I love that place. I don't think there's anywhere safer. I think that in my world, there are no heroes and villains. It's just people. And it's just people, and people do good shit and people do bad shit. And I think that and I'm a human. And when I look at it that way, when I look at myself as one grain of sand on the beach that has a whole bunch of other people and how small I am, I'm just a person, and I've done some good stuff and I've done some bad stuff. So when we talk about restorative or like these places where somebody got to sit down, that's how we say it where I'm from, like, hey, such and such got to sit, or as Wyclef John would say, they go into November, and you got a chance for your mind to finally sit still and you find yourself, man. This is what gave us Malcolm X. This is what has given a lot of people, you know, and I'm not a proponent of jail. Let me be very clear, because people twist your words, you know what I'm saying? But it's a reality and it's a thing that's there. And if somebody wants to be better, I think they should have an opportunity to be better. I think we have, as in a society, especially in the social media drenched, virtue signaling, everybody's perfect world that we're in now, I think we've lost a bit of our humanity. I think we've lost a bit of empathy. I think we've lost a bit of actual human to human connection and contact. And I think anything that restores humanity, I'm with. And I think that, you know, and somebody's going to post, right? Like the one person that went through that program and went out and recidivism and went back to whatever the case is. But but if it helps anybody, it's worth it in my mind. And I just remember where I come from, man. And that's where that's what I'm moving to. These are the things that I want to work on. That's why I wrote the book that I wrote. That's why I'm writing the stuff to parents. And that's why the number one thing I say is, regardless of what you feel, you deserve for your kid to have a good education. Regardless of what you've done, you deserve to be happy in your life. You deserve to have a modicum of peace. I don't care what you've done. And that's not excluding almost anything. Listen, bro, I ain't gonna get religious on people. It is what it is. But I remember in that Bible, and I'm gonna end on this and give it to Omar. Like there was the parable where, you know, the point when God forgave somebody, and then he didn't forgive somebody else, and he like, yo, like, I just forgave all the stuff you did. You about to go tax this person in the same way. I come from something where the people that I love, and myself included, had to be forgiven for some stuff. And it far be it for me to castigate or cast somebody out of society. And I think y'all know that that's more than just words from me, because you heard me talk about it last week on this show, and you heard me go to war about it on Sunday's show. And I don't know too many people, but that's more pro-Black than I am. So I'm glad that you shared this article, and it touches me in a very personal way.
No. And if you think about it quickly, Omar, before you go, both of these individuals, I believe, so we're talking about out of San Quentin, we're talking about Rashawn New York Thomas, and then out of another institution in Pennsylvania, we're talking about David Luis Suave Gonzalez. They're both in prison, and their first goal was not, you know, college. I mean, they needed to finish with their GED first, right, and then embark on this lengthy process, which can take 4 to 5 times on the outside than on the inside to get your college degree, right, against tremendous odds and perseverance. So I missed that part. They were still working to finish their K-12, and then flipping over, and then working towards their higher ed degrees. Omar.
Yeah, man. Look, I love this article. It's one of those inspiring outtakes, and then you start looking at the statistical information behind this, and you just start getting really, really like despondent, right? Or at least I did when I was reading this, because here's the breakdown. I'm going to take this into 2 different directions. The first direction, just from like a social justice component, is you're looking at a system, sadly, in school that is pushing people towards the prison system, and the school system should be saving them from that, right? And then it's not like Black and brown folks have all the lawyers and all the social graces, or excuse me, not social graces, social capital, excuse me, in the world
Mhm.
to essentially, well, Johnny's a bad kid. He decided to do cocaine, but give him a chance. It's like, yo, this one black kid and brown kid got caught with half a joint, and now they're going away
Yeah.
to jail for 20 years, right?
Yep.
And what I want to get into in my first slant is that from just a criminality perspective, and we bring it up a lot in the show, and Chris brought it up this morning. And man, if you haven't read it, everybody, I love this book. It's called The New Jim Crow. It just so happened that that author was one of my sister's mentors at the ACLU, and my sister was doing an internship up there. So she is the real deal, and she wrote one hell of a book. And the book talks about when segregation stopped, and they were like, how do we make people second class citizens again? Because we don't have Jim Crow laws, we don't have segregation. The answer Reagan and Andrew Card, who was the chief of staff at the time, had was, let's just incriminate them all for drugs. Because if we send them to prison, and I'm talking about blacks disproportionately and then
Mhm.
browns, they're toast, can't vote, can't get a job. And then here's what I'm really getting into. It's the suppression of educational opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you going to advance yourself? So if you all don't know these statistics, they're frightening. 2 million people incarcerated in the United States. It's just a ton. All right. Like when you think about the 300 million people here, you incorporate, you take out the kids, take out the old people, 2 million people. What are we doing? Now, 2 out of 3 of those folks will go back to jail in 3 years.
Yep.
After in a 10-year period, the statistics is 80%. And look, you can look at 1,000 places that have done the statistics. I'm, a bit of an elitist to my alma mater. Harvard put out these statistics. And Harvard's one of a bazillion people that put out the exact same statistics. And where I'm leaning towards on the educational side is that to acquire an education and given the opportunity to advance yourself in college exponentially decreases recidivism. So that's a fancy way for saying, yo, you get a GED, you go further, your likelihood of going back to jail is microscopic. And yet, what are we doing? What the is the point of these jails? Because I don't know, like back in John Adams' days, it was like the rehabilitation of people. And then everyone's like, jails are for rehabilitation. It's a timeout from society so they can get rehabilitated and come back into society. And I'm like, what is this 1950s mumbo jumbo? Put your money where your mouth is. If it was really about rehabilitation, you would be pushing these educational programs, because the statistics behind those that are incarcerated that find religion, or find more appropriately literacy, and more importantly find, or not as importantly, excuse me, that I meant as importantly, religion, literacy, and education, the likelihood of those folks going back to jail is microscopic. So it makes me wonder, is this shit all on purpose? Hey, if these people aren't educated, if these people aren't voting, maybe we can keep the power structure alive. So it makes me very despondent. It makes me very angry, because I'm really glad you shared the article, and I decided to do a deep dive into, oh, I've studied this before. Like, let me go back and refresh my notes into recidivism, into which is reincarceration rates. And then what I really dived into is, how does the effect of education translate into lowering recidivism? And it's exponential. You're talking about, like, it's something ludicrous, like less than like 2% of people that went on to get like some level of educational attainment in college will go back to jail. So I loved this story because it was inspirational, but we talked so much about K through 12, and I feel like it was a wonderful moment to dive into the power that education could have, and the life altering aspects that it can have, even for those folks who absolutely deserve a second chance when they get out of these quote rehabilitative places. Like, it makes me just pissed off and be like, my God, like I mean, as Dr. Charles Cole says, man, we out here on our own. We out here on our own. The decks are stacked against us. And this is why the South Star Classroom exists, to not only educate, but to come in and get these things started, because I'm sick and tired of this society allowing this shit to happen.
Yeah, I mean, these things
Not
are.
as-
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
These things are all related too, because you know, you brought up the concept of rehabilitation, right? And I've been thinking about this too, mainly today, as a result of, you know, the conversation this morning and then planning for today, is you know, rehabilitation and then looking at like recidivism, right? So there is no rehabilitation happening in prisons, very little. And you know, there, for sure, like facts, 100%, there are individuals that um, that would benefit from some particular type of counseling, therapy, mental health support. But the vast majority of people behind bars have none of those things, and they just got caught in, you know, making poor choice after poor choice, left with no other choices, right? And so a little bit of here, a little bit there, a little bit there, 3 strikes, you're out, right? They've obviously, you know, I've learned my lesson. I'm in prison now. You know, there's no amount of like rehab or time that's going to like make me rethink this. And so this concept of rehabilitation, we have to, you know, we have to change the narrative around that, because people do make mistakes. I also think about what's not mentioned in this like one pager that we looked at earlier, the school to prison pipeline, is to think about the model for running detention in schools, right? Like, let's run detention in schools.
Yeah.
Let's hold these kids back because
Yeah.
their parent couldn't get them to school on time, or because parents didn't have the money to buy them enough school uniforms. So on Friday they were out of uniform, or, you know, didn't have enough food to eat in the morning. And so, you know, Omar is kind of, you know, acting a little unpredictable in the morning, and he threw something and now he has detention because he had an empty stomach, right? It's you know, stuff that happens every day in our schools, right? This thing we call detention, right? So changing the narrative on that. And then I'll close on this is, you know, this, one of the reasons I wanted to bring both of these pieces forward is because a couple of weeks ago on this show, we talked about, you know, this situation in Oakland with this school shooting and all these things that could have led up to it. But essentially, young people are out, they're making poor choices. They are not engaged in school. And we talked about, you know, the need for some kind of intervention or violence prevention program, right? And I said that violence prevention is not a program. Violence prevention for young people is good quality and access to good schools that engage students in their learning and that provide a sense of purpose for young people. We're hearing the same thing from these two individuals about what happens in prison. The best violence prevention programs in prison is actually providing education to people that are behind bars, because it gives them a sense of meaning, a purpose, and of like something that's going to come next. So I'm not going to make this poor choice in this moment because I got to get to this next level in this like class that I'm in, right? Because I'm actually going somewhere. So again, I wanted to bring these two things together because, you know, they are tied together, and it's hard to look at. It is. I'm with you, but I wanted to make sure that we brought it forward. You know, maybe as an opening to having more conversations. I really want to give a shout out to the men that are, you know, behind these different projects and podcasts. And I mean, I'm going to do a little bit of work to see if you know, we can get some connection with them because they're doing powerful work.
Dope.
You know, yeah. So
Yeah, dope. Yeah, let's try to
shout out to all them.
Connect with them.
Yep.
I'll go quick on my final thought, man, because I know I got to get out of here. But I appreciate the show. I appreciate what you brought. I think, you know, again, this is kind of leading to that whole thing of I'm not trying to be nobody's role model, man, because, you know, people be like, man, you made these good decisions. You did this. No, I didn't. Listen, only reason I didn't sell dope is because I ain't had a heart to sell dope. Like, and I had a dad that was bigger than me and that had kicked my ass. It wasn't that I was just a good kid or this or that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Especially when you start talking about girls and money. Like, I would have absolutely did that if I had the heart to it. I was just scared and I was a punk. And it worked out in my favor in that way. I think that, But that I like working with my people. I like working with people that's coming out of something. I like working with people that's been through something. So, I appreciate this episode, one, for me being able to talk about the book, but two, like us being able to have that bridge drawn of like, what the school to prison pipeline is and what people are doing with their second chance at life. And those are the people that I want to be around. And that's what I want to do. So this was powerful. And I hope that people check out all of those articles. Because they're in the comments, and when you get a chance, David or Omar, please link the show from this morning so they can check that out too.
Yep.
I love it, man. Thanks, Doc. I'll make my comments very short because we're at time. Big shout out to David. Love the show today. Great research, great topic. I would love to follow up with any one of these gentlemen and see if we can get them on the show and have this conversation. Because ultimately, we all focus on K through 12 education, but this is such a fascinating topic to discuss the power of education and what could do to like change a life. And I think it's a microcosm for this is what is so imperative, as David eloquently said, for our community, because it's like you keep on trying to throw a band-aid on this flesh wound instead of like curing the situation from the inside. And like David said, it's like, hey, let's throw a counselor at it, or let's get this violence prevention program. And it's like, no. An excellent quality education with a school that has incredible cultural awareness and is a village that loves children with high expectations, but incredible supports will change the trajectory of kids in this country. And you know what? Like, as we keep talking about it, maybe we're going to get into some trouble, which I love it. I hope we get into some trouble.
Take us home, David.
I'm good. That was my closing thought. So go ahead and close us out, Charles. Yeah.
Well, listen, man, that's David. That's Omar. I'm Charles. And hopefully you will join us back next week at the same bad time, same bad station. Please like and subscribe. Go to YouTube and go to the Agentic shows. Lock in there with us. And if you haven't, go to charlescode3rd.com and you can get all this stuff for free. Just leave an email address so we can stay in touch with you. This has been another episode of the South Star Classroom, and we will see you all next time. Peace out.